We'll start recording this. YouTube, you haven't missed much. It's just the introduction to what's happening and why. So the calendar we have at the moment is vaguely following human timelines. The start of the game will be 1444, just because it's a nice date. I liked how Ambenar did that. I thought it made a lot of sense, and that is what we're doing here. So we basically have to trace history all the way up to 1444, which is when campaigns would start. The big question is, why does the calendar go from from BC into AD? Why do we have this new calendar? I didn't really want to have like a great religious figure was born, because that's far too close to reality. Instead, we want something else. And one of the inspirations I had was, well, at the very heart of this magical explosion, you have what is effectively anti-magic. And it is the discovery of that anti-magic, huzzah, that changes everything. And I think that's what's going to happen at 0 AD. It takes a while for the anti-magic to basically absorb enough magical energy to become physically important. And there's still going to be a very, very small amount of it around, but it will grow pretty quickly. And I think that 0 AD is going to be the discovery of effectively anti-magic, which will allow access to a lot of different things and different technologies. I think influence on Galciv works a bit like Civ 4. Requires a threshold to expand. Yeah, that's what I was assuming, but it didn't say anywhere what that threshold was. Went back to Stellaris and it was a night and day experience. I mean, Stellaris is a game that's been around for 6 years and is pretty well developed, whereas Galciv 4 is still in development. So I'm not surprised by that. Witty, thank you very much for the 13-month resubscription. Very much appreciate the ongoing support there. Thank you. In fact, I'm just going to say in the notification, switching to world building for an hour. Okay. Discovery of anti-magic or discovery of uses for anti-magic as of the date. Discovery of anti-magic. So part of what we have going on here is the timeline. And if I just switch over to the World Builder document, we can take a look at the timeline, which is not in geography. I don't think it's under MISC. Ah, crikey, where is it? The beginning? No. It's in one of these. There it is. Races. So the timeline. I do wish it was possible to expand these windows. That's one thing I'm missing. But down here towards the bottom, we have started to sketch it out. So again, we are following a relatively historical timeline. So 300,000 BC is roughly when the cataclysm begins. That is roughly when Homo sapiens and Neanderthals split. Seemed like a reasonable time to do that, because that's basically the point where the different evolutions begin. Makes sense. Then in 3,300 BC is the rise of Sumer and the Sumerians. And that is effectively going to be when the humans and the elves begin to actually start to coalesce in enough numbers, like the rise of agriculture and the first city-states. What program is that? This program is Worldographer. Worldographer. Hexographer 2, known as Worldographer. So we have the rise of Sumer, and then one of the things that we started to do was basically say, where are those cities? Where are those cities? So we have the northern humans over here in this plain over there. We have the southern humans down here. We have the elves here. And those are the three important factions at this point. I think we should also list out where like the lizard men are, because they'll be probably in here. And maybe dwarves. Because the dwarves and the lizard men were around before the elves and the humans appeared. Though the dwarves probably not by much. Question, are monstrous races not inherently dumb evil enough to have a campaign in their territories? Not sure what you mean by that. Because there are definitely monstrous and evil races around. Are the elves basically China? No, Dragonborn are basically China. Dragonborn are off map. So one thing I should emphasize is this map is roughly the size of Europe. And in fact, I did a very scientific test and matched out all of the hexes and their north-south can never remember if it's latitude or longitude. I think it's latitude. Latitude's up, down, longitude's left, right. I don't remember. How does that work? Longitude is east-west. So latitude is north-south. So I've worked out the north-south latitudes of various cities around the world versus where they are on this map. This is something that I spent like 3 hours. I was bored. I was just like, I want to do something. So Trondheim is roughly on this level. So if we zoom out, we can see that Trondheim is up here. Then we've got Sundsvall in Sweden, which is about here. We've got Tampere in Finland, Turku in Finland, Stockholm, Sweden, Norrköping, Sweden? I think that's Sweden. Inverness, Scotland. That's North Scotland right here. Which I think actually makes sense. Like, the more I look at this, the more I'm thinking that is the west coast of Scotland. I know this is kind of like the Norway analogy, but it also looks a lot like west coast Scotland. So Inverness being here makes a lot of sense. Then we've got Dundee, Edinburgh. So Edinburgh is in kind of this region, which again, like climate and temperature, yeah, I think that makes sense. Moscow is here. Moscow is surprisingly far south, actually. That's one thing I learned from that. Kiel in North Germany. So North Germany is basically, or Germany is basically going to be this, which again, I think makes sense. Hamburg is there. Berlin is on this level. Then we've got Leipzig, Plymouth, which is the southernmost city in England, effectively. Mainz, still in Germany. Chartres, and now we're starting to get to French territories. What's that? Tours. And that makes sense because this is supposed to be Fantasy France. We're now talking about the Fantasy French territories. So we've got Tours, then we've got Poitiers going out to here. Lyon, Bordeaux. Now we're talking southern France. Bordeaux is like in line with this stuff. So we're starting to get a bit warmer. We're starting to see the emergence of shrubland and less quality farmland over there, though the north is still very much very, very fertile. Then we've got Avignon, Bilbao, northern Spain. And that's great because this was effectively Iberia. Northern Spain's right there. Now, this is all complete fluke, by the way. Well, not really. I planned it, but still. Varna, then Rome. So we've got Italy coming down into here. And this is, again, kind of the bit that I was saying looks a bit like Italy. This is like the Po Basin in Italy. Like Rome probably would be more like this. So Rome's perhaps a little far north, but doesn't have to be completely on. Porto, Portugal. Madrid, middle of Spain. So Madrid is a fair bit further south. Madrid will be like in the savannah. And the savannah here is kind of supposed to be a bit more like Kenya. Then we've got Badajoz, still in... Is Badajoz Spain or Portugal? I think that's Spain. Alicante, Portugal. And then Athens. So Athens is like one of the most far south European cities. Coming along into like this region. And then Athens is basically where the tieflings are. The tieflings and the devils. Then we've got Kenchala, which is Tunisia or Morocco. It's one of those two. Gafsa, which is Tunisia. Beirut, which is Lebanon. So we're now very much in the Middle East, which as we get more to the desert, like Lebanon is kind of in this region. Haifa, Jerusalem. Jerusalem would be in the far south. So we're really starting to get into the deserty regions. Although there is still jungle, so we could have like this. This is also still Jerusalem. And then finally at the very, very bottom we have Basra in Iraq. So yeah, I was really pleased with how this lined up. So every one of these hexes is 10 miles. And then 7 hexes is 120 kilometers. I know messing around with miles and kilometers is just easier to do in kilometers. The Eastern Sea with a limited water movement is probably even Mediterranean in its effect. Yes, absolutely. So this temperature and climate is Baltic. And then this is Mediterranean. I think that makes a lot of sense. Then over here we have the Atlantic. And also if we take a look at the weather systems, which we did do, that's what this map was. Atlantic, winds blowing along the coast here. So this entire coastline is going to be really cold. And then we have the warmer weather coming from the north, and the warmer weather kind of pools in what is effectively the Mediterranean as it comes off the desert. So yes, it is very much Mediterranean. Are your fancy versions of European nations human realms, or would the dominant race vary? Dominant races will very much vary. At the beginning, the elves are probably slightly better off than the humans, because the elves still have some magic that they can use. So they would have a bit of an easier time of things. But then the humans, in this setting, have kind of a genetic memory. They remember, even if they don't realize it, that they used to be able to do magic. And there's always this kind of missing thing for humans. They're always trying to fill that void. And one of the things that humans embrace is exploration. So there is going to be a period in history where the humans just start to colonize everything. So you kind of have the explosion of Greek colonies around the Mediterranean. That's probably the best analogy. So you just have little pockets of humanity appearing all over the place, even though the heartlands of humanity are here, along here, and in here. So the humans are very much in this zone. Eventually the halflings take over this, so the humans will be down here. Is there an area of monsoon season? Those are interesting. Kind of. Over here and down here. So where it's blue colour, that's where there's rain. There's rainfall. So this would be like over the United Kingdom. As cold air meets warm air. But where the two really smash into each other, like here, warm air is moving very, very quickly, so it's a much more stark contrast. That's why I have the dotted line. This is where it's like tornado season. Hurricanes, maybe even. And it'll probably be something similar over on this coast, which will disrupt a bit of the trade coming in from the east. So again, because we have this nice zoomed out version, we have the elves mostly along this river, humans along here, gnomes back here, Goliaths probably moving across. We were talking about having Minotaurs in this region, and the Minotaurs get virtually wiped out by various other incursions from different races. They eventually become a steppe people. The Minotaurs can be roughly aligned to the Cossacks. This area, as it turns out, is a very, very highly contested region because it's actually quite fertile, especially in here. But you've got these steppe tribes coming in, so they're a frontier, and they're too far behind or too far away from the other settled races to really be defended. With halflings being a human-gnome hybrid, would there be a native halfling culture continuing on from the local humans or something external? So the halflings will grow up in this region. The halflings kind of emerge after the hobgoblin and goblin invasions. The hobgoblins and goblins will arrive on this coast, because the hobgoblins, or the greenskins in general, have what's effectively an Atlantis. They're based out here, but that continent sinks. And then in the migration to get away from the sinking, the goblins are kicked out first, because there's still some land left. Goblins are kicked out first, because they are the smallest and the weakest race. They arrive and start to hit this north coast, and eventually the whole thing sinks, and that's when the orcs arrive, and the orcs arrive more southerly, and they arrive in these islands. I hear pirate goblins. I mean, it's more going to be, I don't really want to say Norse goblins, but they'll be like raider culture goblins. Then the orcs will arrive. The orcs are actually going to be pretty high tech. They are very much going to be pirates. So the island nations, the maritime nations of the orcs are going to be pirates because they have a nautical culture from back home. Sea people, sea goblins. Yeah, effectively. And the goblins will arrive like several centuries before the orcs do, which is going to give them time to split out into regular goblins and hobgoblins. And the hobgoblins are a really important race for the development of this map, because the hobgoblins eventually, after several centuries, arrive here. And judging by this map, you can probably recognize this is going to be an incredibly strategic location. And the hobgoblins take it. And then in 1444, that's where they are. Would you at any point look at the races and do some stat adjustments? I want to try and keep things as vanilla as possible. What I don't want to do is change the major, like the main stats, that's probably going to stay all the same, because I want to make this as compatible with 5th edition as I can. Sub-races we may include, but I want to make it feasible that most, if not all, sub-races are feasible in this world. Byzantine Hobgoblins. That's exactly it. Can't stick around for most of the stream, so I appreciate the quick uploads on YouTube. Got to go now. No worries, Antichrist. And thank you. Are those the only hobgoblins, or are there other nations? Well, that's one of the things we have to determine. So what I want to do with the streams going for the next couple of weeks is basically trace history. And we can start to paint on this map where the different realms are, and then the push and shove of the different realms, the rise and fall of the different kingdoms, possibly empires. And then we can, from that, create a shattered world, which will organically include a couple of remnants. Orcs need more naval things, probably like Elven Warrior, Elven Weapon Familiarity. So the Orcs are going to have one key advantage. Gunpowder. The arrival of gunpowder coincides with the arrival of the Orcs. They're still going to be early, still going to be basic, but it's a pretty big advantage. Especially when you're on boats. And that's also another reason why the Hobgoblins thrive. The Renaissance is effectively kicked off by the Hobgoblins, because the Hobgoblins start to initially fight, but then eventually interact and trade with the Orcs. So the first arrival of the Orcish technologies, which are completely foreign to the rest of the realm, will flow through the Hobgoblins. And that is going to result in a pretty cataclysmic shift in the balance of power. Previously, it was centered kind of in this region, and then it will become more southern. Oh, Orcs not a dumb race in this. I mean, Orcs are never really a dumb race. Savage, perhaps. I wouldn't say they were dumb, though. And Orcs may not necessarily have the tactical nous to use gunpowder correctly, but they come with it. And eventually, as it starts to propagate, then that advantage will lessen. So if we take another look at the timeline, the Orcs will arrive pretty late on. So the Orcish migration's not until the 1300s. And then campaign starts 1444. So they have about 150 years-ish. Not complaining, but it feels like world building is much earlier this week. Oh, it's because I'm doing it twice. Galactic Civilization we decided needed some more work, so I'm doing world building now because I was in the mood and we only have an hour. And then I'll do it again after Ambenar. So I realised that this is kind of a different audience than usual, so I just wanted to give you the rundown of roughly of what's happening. And then we can talk about the different rise and fall of the different realms. I'm also trying to think of how am I best going to do the different races. You know, I think that might be a GIMP thing. I think what I want to do is take a copy of this map now. Have I done that already? Maybe? And S is with those, that's fine. I think I'm still going to create another one. So we're going to go tile width 40, aspect ratio is being preserved. Enter, because you need to make sure that this is always the same. And we're going to export that image. We're going to call it origin world 14. I'm going to take away the NS. Enter. And then as soon as it says exported, which it should in a minute, there it is. We then go to GIMP, where it's currently my thumbnail creation. And we're going to load that up in GIMP as soon as I find where it is. That one. And if I was better at Photoshop, I'd probably do it in there instead. But this program I just know a lot more. Okay, so this is the world as it is. And the reason I want to start using this is because I can start painting on this and I have different layers. So bottom layer is going to be north, humans, south, humans, elves. So we are talking at this point about 3,300 BC. And we have already placed the city. So on the elven thing, we're going to make the elves cyan. We're going to use paintbrush. Size 300, I suspect, is way too big. It is. Make that, say, 50. Smaller. Make that 30. Perfect. And the opacity will just reduce, and we basically just say this is where the elves are. Right there. And then we need another color, which is going to be the northern humans. The northern humans will make yellow. And we'll just stick you right there. Reduce the opacity. Let's say like 50. Then we have the southern humans, and then these ones I think I'm going to make purple. And the southern humans are at this stage censored down there. 50. Now the reason that this is important is because we can basically say at this point, okay, they start to spread and take over this area. And then we can say, whoops. Okay, the northern humans start to spread and they've taken over this area. Whoops. Need to make sure the colors work. And they've taken over this area over here. That color needs to be darker. And then we can start to map out the areas of influence of each of those different factions. So this is going to be saved as, I think I might even create a new folder for this one, which is going to be Rise and Fall. World Origin 14, so we have that base level. And then this is going to be 3,300. Should have called that 3,300 BC. I can still do that. There we go. So now we have 33 BC. 3,300 BC. I saw the title and wanted to check this out. Can anyone fill me in on what's going on? Psycho, I would recommend watching, I was going to say the beginning of the stream, but actually the beginning was Gal Civ, from maybe half an hour ago, because I do a really in-depth introduction of everything that's happening. Or you can also check out my YouTube series, which you can find at youtube.com/MordredViking, where it's the entire thing of how we got to this stage. But because I've literally just explained everything, I don't really want to do it again for everyone else. What makes evil races evil? Is it the gods' beliefs are generic? I don't necessarily want to say evil races are evil. It's more about civilized races. Which ones have technology, culture, cities, that type of thing. So, yeah, okay. First thing first, though, let's go and change your color. Make you a bit brighter. There we go, better. So we can see where those humans are. So the next major event that occurs is 2400 BC, which is the Egyptian Old Kingdom. What happens at that point? I think that this is the rise of the first major empire, and I think that was going to be an elven one. So then let's go ahead and save this. This is, what was it, 2400, did I say? Yes. And then at this point we should have more city-states, I think, appearing. And then the elven singular empire, which was the cyan color, beginning to really spread out. Along the length of this river. So they are the most well developed and defined race at this point. That's not to say that the humans aren't starting as well, they probably are. Just not as much. What about the Wood Elves? So the Wood Elves are probably just low-key there until they are met by some of the other humans. So you're not wrong, they should also have their own establishment. Are we defining some specific point in time in the world or just creating the world's backstory? World's backstory. Asking about languages, but now I think about it, it should come after you've worked out the people movements. Yes. That's actually a good point. So, prehistory, we're talking when the genies are still around. We probably should have like a movement of elves coming in from over here, withdrawing into the woods. I feel like that would be much earlier, though. Like, the Wood Elves should be there almost from the start. They're the people that fled through here, then ended up kind of in this region. So let's go ahead and add Wood Elves. And we're going to put the Wood Elves here. And I think their color is going to be green. So at this point, the Wood Elves are kind of here. Which is going to be a bit hard to see. Let's make the opacity 70-ish. Yeah, we need to make that a lot easier to see. So long as we can still see the terrain underneath, it's fine. And the gnomes at this point have not emerged. The other race that we need at this point, in fact, they are probably there from the earlier... Whoops, what did I just do? I think I just opened you up again. Yeah. Huh. Minotaurs. And we were going to say that the Minotaurs were kind of in this area. And the Minotaurs at this stage were probably relatively well developed. Let's make the Minotaurs like a grey, reddish grey. Of course, the early conflicts are between the Minotaurs and the Elves, and I would say that the Minotaurs are probably in this kind of area. Because eventually these and these will come into conflict. Do all the races begin and develop at relatively the same pace? Are there any gods, chance, precursors, random effects that higher or lower development? I mean, there will be a couple which are more developed. Like, at this point, the lizardmen are already pretty well developed. So let's make the lizardmen. I think I'm going to steal the same green as the Wood Elves. And we're just going to say that these guys are basically controlling the whole of the jungle already at this stage. Although they haven't really moved beyond the jungle. We'll include this bit. Then we'll go fill. For some reason the bucket fill, even if you don't have gradiated sides, doesn't fill everything. Which is annoying because you get this little line that's just left open around the edge. I turned off all the gradient sides to the brushes because I wanted easy filling. It still doesn't work. Doesn't need to be perfect. It just annoys me then. It's there. Alright, so that's vaguely where the lizardmen are at this stage. They're a pretty established empire. I mean, here's the thing. So, Minotaurs, in my thinking in this, are kind of like the Mycenaean Minotaur. They have established palaces, they have established cities and areas, but they get pushed out and then they become a very rare race because of that, and then they become more like the Cossacks as they're basically shifted out to this region, which puts them in constant conflict with the centaurs coming from the steppes. Didn't they develop when they moved out of the jungle into the deserts? Their race from the jungle, but the civilization of the desert. Yeah, so at some point there is going to be some movement out here. I would say we're still too early on for that, though. Although that would mean that they would need to develop pretty quickly. You know what? Let's have some beginning to work in the desert. So then let's have this be jungle lizardmen. And then desert lizardmen already appearing kind of at this point, and they would be yellow. We'll just steal that yellow again because they're unlikely to butt heads. And we'll say that these ones have started to develop out to about here. They haven't gone that far yet. Early days. And we could even say that at this period, we're in a bit of a small ice age. Things might be wetter. And then they just adapt as the weather changes. Might even say that they came out of here. No. Although this really does beg the question, why wouldn't they be up in the woods? Because something else should be. We don't need to answer all the questions now. But something should stop them moving north. So what other peoples do we need at this stage? Because the next era that comes along is the Greek city-states. That's the human explosion. And that's when we start to see the humans really start to rapidly colonize. In fact, let's get the North and South humans doing stuff. So you could have taken most of this valley. I mean, I have a feeling I'm actually being a little bit too cautious. We'll say that the northern humans are probably a bit bigger because this place is super nice. Would metalworking be a thing at this point? I mean, we're talking pre-bronze Bronze Age. We're getting close to the Bronze Age. So let's have the humans coming out to kind of some of the lower hills. Out there. Which would suggest to me that these elves need to be bigger. Just being along that river is not enough. I'm going to say that they've also started to take out some of the woodlands here in the north, because it's not that far north. Let's say you guys are in the less intensive woods. Because in the woods there are probably, here be bad things. Let's say you've spread out kind of in that direction, so yeah. You've probably taken more of this, and then probably also spread out along here. No, because irrigation there will be harder. And this is just so fertile that the elves are really exploding at that point. So I think that the Minotaurs do need to be a lot bigger. Because they're supposed to be like the early big bad. So Minotaurs were that colour. I'm going to have the Minotaurs all the way out here at this point. Because Minotaurs are one of the giant kin. And they are supposed to be scary for the elves to deal with. Say that they're not that eager on the marshes. But then they do expand out that way. So let's go and get rid of this bit. It's their territory, but they haven't really used that much. But they are out here quite heavily. And moving further and further inland to get away from the marsh. Okay, so that's the Minotaur realm. That looks a lot more intensive. I like that more. Dwarves! Yeah, dwarves would definitely be a thing at this point, and they would probably be similar to the Minotaurs. So, dwarves, what colour should we give them? Grey. And we'll say that the dwarves, at this point, in fact, dwarves are already there. Something... Yeah, I think the dwarves would go up into the mountains. They've probably taken all of this. I hate the fact that it leaves that ring. Why? Spacing? Nope. hardness is at 100. If anyone has any idea why it leaves this ring around the edge, do let me know, because it's very annoying. And then I think the other thing that we do need to be doing on the timeline is... Now, there is actually a timeline software thing. There it is. Create new timeline. History of the world. There it is. So, creating the historical entries. I'm going to need 2 copies of this open. One on one side, one on the other side. This side is going to go back to the articles because I have my timeline article here. And then we're basically going to create cards, which is going to be all of these. So we've got the new historical entry. This is 300,000. This is the Mordeus Cataclysm. I can't spell. Something like that. Actually, we could probably use minus 3,000. Apparently I did get it there. Okay, so that is the Mordeus Cataclysm. So how does that look on the timeline? Ah. And then if we edit this, does it give us more space? It does. Probably shouldn't have dismissed that tutorial. At some point I should probably watch that because I'm approaching this completely from new. So then next up we have got minus... Actually, there's still 3,300 BC. Sumer. Human Elven Emergence. So encroachments from the north begin. Decline, forcing population to desert. Create. So those are the important ones right now because that's as far as we've got. And then we also have the 2400 BC. I should call this 300,000 BC. And at some point we'll come up with something better than BC. I was thinking like BMD or something before Mordius. After Mordius. I don't know. We'll work something out. Try using the pencil. It has hard edges. That's true. Aha! Zay, you're a genius. Okay, cool. And then we have the next historical entry, which was the other thing. Old Kingdom. This is important national. I would say this is a global one. Founding. So this is the first Elven Empire. Lizard men continue decline. Before tea and after tea. Oh, nice. I like that. All right, let's create that one. So what we probably do want to do is break these down into what happens in each era, and then we can start to trace out those effects on the map. Because at some point we want to work out, like, when do the dwarves spread to the other mountains? When do the Eastern Raiders come in? When are the elves, like, starting... When is sailing discovered? Or the sail? And we're also, and this is perhaps more important, the founding of different cities, which is also going to lead to we need to start thinking about what city names are, particularly in this era. And I kind of like using this era because more stuff has happened already. So I think this is a good point. Let's zoom right in. We'll just have one layer, which is cities. Or populations. We're going to have you right at the top because you're important. We're going to say this is in black. The dot for this needs to be smaller, so we'll make this a 15. No, a 15, not 150. Come on! 15! Enter. Thank you. So then we can say, okay, that's a population center. So we've got the bigger cities, which will be 20s. Maybe even make these 30s. No, let's go with 20. Allows me to go up more later. So we'll have the northern human hometown there. We'll have the elven capital there. The dwarven capital there. And in fact, at this point, the dwarven capital is probably bigger. See, now that we can see where that capital is, the humans probably have spread out more into the woods up here. And then the lizardmen. The lizardmen probably have a couple. Lizardmen capital is probably there. Or possibly... there. I would say probably in there. In fact, that's a really good spot. Because it's got access to the hills for minerals and stone and construction build items. It's in lighter jungle. It's up in the hills, so it's more defensive, and it's on a river. Yeah, the big lake up here is going to be really interesting. So I do think that something should be rising here. But what? I don't know. And also this big lake would definitely have potential. I don't think it would be as developed as this. I think that this is going to be the main Lizardman area. So let's go ahead and put another city there. And then... would they have come by sea? Almost certainly not. Would they come by land? Yes, probably. And probably somewhere like up here. Let's say there. Is this Warhammer Fantasy World map? No, this is the Mordred Viking. I felt like building my own world map. Quite different from Warhammer. So we can see already from the number of cities that the Lizardmen have, they are quite a lot more well developed. Now I do think that at this era the Elves want to have more than a city. So where would the other elven cities be in this region? Now, one thing to bear in mind is it takes you about a day to travel 2 tiles. So if we're talking Silk Road, and this is kind of an interesting stat, along the length of the Silk Road from China to Europe, there is a settlement of some kind every day's travel, with bigger settlements more distantly spaced. So I don't think we want to go and say, right, small settlement, small settlement, small settlement, but we do want to have the more well-spaced ones. So perhaps like a settlement here, which is going to be their big farming area, maybe even here where they get some basic... they get irrigation from the river. No, from the lakes. I think I prefer their city there. And then perhaps one on this side of the lake as well, maybe right here, connecting to this lake. And then that's going to be where a lot of their timber comes in, because they can float the timber across the lake into here, then sail it down to the other cities as needed. That's probably the origins of that one. I'll put a city in the big lake. Possibly, but I think that would be much later on. Remember, at this point, we're still pre-Bronze Age. It's like Copper Age. And then the Dwarfs would probably have more cities. So their capital is here, which is their... is that the ancestral? No, the ancestral capital is actually going to be in here. So they will change location. I kind of like having a city here. So the Dwarves probably do have more metalworking going on because they're frickin' Dwarves. I don't think anyone really cares about international trade at this point. So trade hubs aren't that important yet. Then maybe a city here as well for wood supplies, for construction. So you got the ones coming from the mountains. You got the one that's where all the food comes from. Then you got the one where the raw materials come from. Humans. Humans at this stage, I think, would still be on just 1. Maybe these guys would have 2. Because this area is supposed to be the most fertile area in the world. This is the Nile. This is the Nile and the Amazon as if it was the same river. And that is a good spot. You got river access, you got hills for wood. Hills for wood. Hills for stone. And then possibly something up here where they start to get some wood as well. But this would be a dangerous location because you would have stuff from the Feywild coming in. So I don't think that anyone would be up there in great numbers. And in fact, I think that general fear at this point would preclude them from going this far up. This is Northern Humans. Let's get rid of some of this. Let's give them a bit of a buffer to the forest. Just say that they're a little further out there, and you know what? Let's just colour that in. And then Minotaurs. So we've already established the Minotaurs don't much like the swamps. So they are down here. Actually, you know what? I do think that the Minotaurs would be along this. That's not the same colour. What's going on? I'm using the pipette to pick up the colour, but it's not the same. That one. Well, that's weird. And then I think I'm going to say, you know what? They have not actually spread out nearly as far as this. They have kind of avoided this area because they want to stay away from those swamps. They're just using the river, and that's it. However, they have started to aggressively colonize this region. So we'll have them a bit more in the hills. Staying away from the woods. Woods are scary. Right, so back to population question. These are Minotaurs. Minotaurs like running. Might even put the Minotaurs starting up here. And then they eventually come to find this area. That would put their bigger population centres nearer the Elves too. Swamp Minotaurs is an interesting combo. It makes me think of Water Buffalo. That's interesting. I like that, actually. Change the colour again. Oh, it's because we're on the wrong... There you go. I had to double click apparently. Alright. Minotaurs, you're moving back in. Marshes are yours. And I think the marshes would actually be, with that in mind, heavily colonized. Because it's really easy for food production there. And if you're a great big cow creature, you probably don't care that much about whoever's there. The marshes, I would say, are a different... Sorry, the swamps are a different factor, different matter. But the marshes are good. So their population center is probably in here somewhere. Maybe right there. So they start as water buffalo. That's kind of interesting. I don't think they'll care as much about the lake. I think they would actually be more interested in a place right there. Wood and building materials. I don't think they would have had any reason to go this way. I think they're more likely to have pushed over here. See, this is why this is valuable. Because you can see where the population centers are and then decide where they've expanded. Which is probably why I should have started by doing this. So let's have them like in the outskirts of this woodland, but not really in the woods yet. And not really in the hills. They wouldn't have any reason to. And then instead, what we'll do is we'll push him out further this way. Different color again. Still, it's picking up the color that's underneath. It shouldn't be. It should only be picking up that layer. Might be a bit drier and slightly less hospitable, but I'm still going to put them out this way. Gives them a bit more space to roam free. Same as this. Now that they're in the marshes, they can push that way too. So the Minotaurs at this stage are pretty big and pretty well developed, which I like. I think they need another city, if not two. Although, Minotaurs probably don't congregate in cities to the same extent as, say, the Elves. That might be the advantage the Elves hold over them. So you know what? This is populated, but it's rural. Later you could have some Highland cattle Minotaurs in the north. True. You'd want to be able to get to and from the nearest village, the nearest town in a day, the nearest town in a week, and the nearest city in a month. Just your rule of thumb. It's a pretty good one. I mean, I would say that it's probably 2 weeks to the city rather than a month. And between, yeah, to village, definitely a day. From outlying farmsteads. So you can sell your produce. Maybe 2 days. And we also have this whole mass. Alright, so I think we do want to establish something down here to be an early rival to the Lizardmen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my other spreadsheet. This one. Because here we listed out somewhere all the races there could also be that we considered. Aha! That's how you extend it. That could be down there. So Gnolls, Loxodon, Minotaurs, Leonids, Kenku, Tabaxi. So Minotaurs we already have. They are related to the Giants. And in fact, we also have some of these. Trolls, Ogres, Cyclops. Yuan-Ti. I feel like Yuan-Ti would be almost a magical experiment gone wrong. Tell me, game, about Yuan-Ti. I don't actually know that much about them. Collective race of psionic serpent folk who were seen as corrupt and degenerate monsters by other races. Appearance of Yuan-Ti varied greatly from nearly human-like to nearly snake-like. I feel like it's probably the beginnings of the conflict between the Yuan-Ti and the Lizardmen, which I think is a conflict which is pretty much still ongoing to this day. Do they come from here? Probably not. I would say the Yuan-Ti are probably from over here. And then we have the Lizardmen over here, and then this is the frontier. I like that more. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove these two population centres. No, we're not. We're going to remove... I do like them. You know what? These are probably population centres that have been recently taken by the Yuan-Ti. So... Jungle Lizardmen. have lost all of this. I'm going to say they actually hold on to this city still, but it is under siege right now. Is there a way of fill? No, I don't think so. I think I'm just going to need to do this in a hurry. Make you 100 size, and just go boop. I'm purposefully making this a pocket. I kind of feel like Yuan Ti would have taken this. Have the lizard men concentrated over on that side. So that's still lizard men. So what color do we make the Yuan Ti? Darker green. So some kind of corruption happens over here, forming the Yuan Ti and making them very aggressive against the lizard men. And then this is the Yuan Ti home world, home area, homeland. Give you the hill area too. Let's remove some of this land from them so we don't have that overlap, though it doesn't really matter that much. Something like that. I think Yuan Ti are normally a desert race? Really? But the thing is, we're trying to push the lizard men into the desert to make them adapt. So you basically have this forced migration from all the lizard men that used to live back here into here. So one of the questions that we will need to answer on the timeline, which is something that occurs during the Egyptian... No, it's not the Egyptian time. It's the previous era to that. It's the... Why are these in the weird order? It's during this era. No, it's not. It's the other one. Oh, I may not have said it was minus... No, I did. Yuan Ti. Emergence. Something creates. Question mark. Yuan Ti. They aggressively push west. These are probably some kind of corrupted lizard men. From something. We don't necessarily need to answer the question of how. Nope. Dates are still definitely right. I don't know why this is in such a weird order. That's very strange. Shouldn't matter. End dates. Ah, you're right. There we go. Haha! Alright, well, I'm pretty happy with this start that we've made to the emergence of some of the different civilizations. The next era was to be... I think it's the Greek city-states. Then the Bronze Age collapse is when the war against the Minotaurs happened, I think. No, we said Minotaurs here. We'll need to work out who the boat people are going to be. Might well be the Minotaurs. Then the Greek city-states is the human explosion, where they really start to aggressively take more territory. And you'll start to see little pockets of humans appearing all over the map. Goblins are much later. But yeah, I like this. This is definitely starting to give us a little bit more characterization to the map, and I think that this is, for the time being anyway, the right tool to do it in. It's relatively easy to adjust. Greek city-states are connected to the invention of sailing tech. That is a good good point. Yes. Let's do that. Greek city-states, invention of the sail. Cool. Which makes even more sense that you'd have boat people attacking. Need to work out who they are. I mean, here's the thing with the boat people. You don't even necessarily need to have them on the map. It's just unknown peoples, boom, suddenly take stuff. Leave that as one of the mysteries. Anyway, this is where I'm going to have to call this stream, I'm afraid. So thank you everyone for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, be sure to hit that follow button to get notifications when I'm live again in the future. I will be back again at 10:30 tonight. Remember, Wednesdays are the day that I have things a little bit off. So 10:30 this evening, we will be playing some Anbanar, followed by more of this. So if you have enjoyed the world building so far, then please, please, please do hit that follow button, and then you can join us again at 1 AM roughly is when we start the world building. Before that, 10:30 is going to be this. If you have any other ideas of different races that we can place around the world, do head over to our Discord, which you can find at this link here. There is the world building section there with more ideas, because I think it is pretty clear that we're going to need more stuff going on. And I don't just mean settled races, I also want other interesting races that would have a reason to be populous enough to cause problems for the settled races to take that territory. So areas of like no-go zone, like the Feywild is effectively a no-go zone, with the exception of the Wood Elves and the Forest Gnomes, because it's frickin' dangerous to anyone else. So nobody will settle in this area. And if there are any other no-go zones, like kind of like the Trolls in the swamps, I'm not going to place them on the map because the swamps belong to the Trolls, effectively. These three, at the very least. Possibly this one too. In fact, almost certainly this one too. So the Trolls are here. In fact, you know what? I should probably set up the Trolls. And we'll make the Trolls red. And they are going to be here. You know what? The dwarves may not have control over the troll territories because the trolls have it. Oh, now that's interesting, because there's a constant battle going on for that territory against the trolls, which the dwarves eventually win, and that's how the dwarves get access to the sea. I like it. So we're going to say that there are trolls all the way out to about here. Which other races are going to need to contend with if they want to get access to that stuff? And it's going to be the same up here. So the trolls don't have any population centers per se, they just own a lot of territory because they're scary. And I think that is entirely in keeping with the trolls. Grab all of that. Bish. And then finally we have this southern area down here, so the dwarves are well and truly hemmed in, which is why the dwarves will have to have a big fight against the trolls, which will kind of set the stage for a lot of the future animosity between those two. That's where the trolls are. And just to clean this up a little bit, or in fact we can just leave the overlap where those two are fighting. I like that too. Anyway, that is going to be it for me for now. I'm going to throw a save onto that one. So we have the Egyptian High Kingdom. It's the first time that the Elven kingdoms are united as this time stamp, and then we can go from there. So if you've enjoyed this, like I said, hit that follow button. If you want to support this channel, check out the Patreon, or you can subscribe here on Twitch. If you want to join the conversation and help me build this all up, then head over to our Discord where you can do that. And then otherwise you can find all the links right there. I'll be back again 10:30 this evening for some Europa Universalis and then some more world building at 1. Bye everyone.